is happening, people? It is Brian Alsruhe with NEVERsate.com, and I reached out to you guys on Instagram and asked whether you guys would like to ask me bench questions or squat questions, and overwhelmingly, you guys chose squat questions. So I made a post, asked, and you guys delivered, and so I have a ton of squat questions to go through, so this entire video is going to be nothing more than me trying to tear through as many of those as I possibly can in the time that I have to hopefully reveal the secrets of the squat universe to everyone, in that you guys will get stronger and better. Yeah. There's no real discernible order here. I'm just going by the top comments and going to start rolling through them. All right, so first question is from KP Training. He asks, any tips for maintaining balance during single leg work? You would like to move away from holding on to things, and also how to keep your elbows down in the squat. So first one, about the single leg work, you mentioned you don't want to hold on to things. I always recommend people, if they struggle a lot with their balance, to actually hold on to something in the rack, whether it be pins or whatever the case may be, just so that they can have better stability, just because your knee can get kind of dicey in there. However, if you are trying to move away from that, there are a couple things you can help to hold your balance. Number one, I would highly recommend moving to an SSB or a Yoke bar if possible, so that your hands don't need to be up so high. If you can keep them down or even out, if you remember back probably in like elementary school when you were in phys ed class and they told you to stand on one leg to stretch your calf or your quad, you actually stuck one finger on your belly button, and that was more just to get your body aligned to the center. So you need to think of things being aligned to the center. You also need to keep your focus on one direct point. If you are looking around or you're squatting in a mirror and you're checking out your form and stuff, stop doing that. You find one point in space and you stay there. Now, as far as keeping your elbows down in the squat, one of the biggest things that's helped me is actually trying to bend that bar across my back like it is a horseshoe. Now, obviously it's a barbell, you're not gonna be able to do that. However, the act of doing that is going to lock in your lats and bring those elbows down, which is going to get your entire upper back more engaged in the movement, which typically means more control, and more control typically means more weight. But one thing is for sure, brother, if you are sticking your elbows behind you, like if your elbows are sticking out behind you during the squat, you are not helping your squat whatsoever, and you're not really using your lats that much. You need to start pulling that thing across so you can bring those elbows down, and you'll be shocked at what that can do to help out your squat. Thank you for the question, brother. I hope you're doing well. Second question comes from Andy O'Connell, and you want to know if your shins need to be perpendicular to the ground in order to have good form. And Andy, what's up? I hope everything's going great with you and your baby. Hope Mike is doing well. For those of you who don't know, Andy actually goes to my gym, and she will know that I am not a form Nazi at all. I know that everyone is built differently, and people have different paths and different medical experiences, and a lot of things goes on that come into play whether someone should have a vertical shin angle or not in the squat. It can come down to where the bar is placed on your back, or where, honestly, how long your bones are can make the difference in that. I do not believe that everyone should squat the same way. I think you are built the way that you're built, so you should squat the way that's best for you, and that's not going to be the same as I squat. And I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no problem with forward knee displacement or people's shins being not perpendicular to the bar. I don't see it as nearly as big of a deal as some coaches do, as long as it's not super extreme and as long as it matches what you're trying to do. So if you have a low bar squat and your knees are sliding all over the place, then it might not be as good as if that bar was placed higher so that you can shove those knees out in front of your toes like an Olympic lifter to kind of drive that bar upward. So although I am sure that someone is going to bash me for it, I really don't think it is that big of a deal. Thank you so much for your question, Andy, and I hope everything's going awesome. All right, Jack Eubangus says that you get elbow pain both when squatting and benching, and you want to know what you could do to help that. Honestly, man, a lot of people already answered you that, and I have to agree with them. If you were getting a lot of elbow pain, especially from a low bar squat, most of the time it has to do with some mobility issue, whether it being your shoulders and your elbows or your wrists. You're doing a lot of things that are cranking yourself in a position that your body doesn't want to be in. So the way to fix that is, of course, up your mobility in the areas that is the problem, so that you can get in those positions without as much pain. In the interim, moving your hands out a little bit on the squat and in a little bit on the bench might give you a little bit of pain relief. However, you are just sticking a Band-Aid on it. So you're gonna have to deal with the actual problem, which is your mobility. I would highly recommend someone like Kelly Starrett and becoming a supple leopard or something like that. Just get some basic mobility stuff. Start cranking around your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, and you'll be shocked at what it will do to actually help you get in better positions, which will make you stronger, but also just take away that pain. If you're lifting in pain all of the time with something that you can stop, then you have to do something to stop it. I hope that helps. All right, Odin Squat Father asks, breathing and bracing tips for the different rep ranges, 1 through 3, 3 to 5, 5 plus, etc. It's going to depend on the exercise as well as where you get your breath and things like that, but I have an entire video about this called How to Breathe and Brace for Reps. It is in my breathing and bracing playlist right on this channel, so you just click that, you will find it, and it will go into depth answer on all of that you want to know. All right, so KG1208 asks, what's your favorite squat variation, and do you use any variations of lunges in your training? So my favorite variation of squat for strength has to either be the SSB or a front squat. I think loading the front of your body is so much more important than loading the back of your body for athletic endeavors, as well as most normal people. And for a lot of people, that positioning of their body is just better on those squats than it is on a back squat. So I personally like those two the best. Now, as far as lunges, I do a ton of single leg work. For strongman, single leg work is very, very important, not only for like carry events and building up your hip flexor and things like a yoke walk or sandbag carry, or even something like the explosiveness on a Atlas stone load or something like that. Lunges are massively, massively important, and I use virtually every single variation I can think of, from something like a Bulgarian split squat to a step up to a walking lunge to a reverse lunge to a overhead lunge, to a holding an Atlas stone out in front of me type of lunge, a walking lunge holding like a sandbag out in front of me. I will do absolutely anything I can to get my legs working in that sort of manner, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I think lunges are way, way, way underrated, and I don't think a lot of people do them because they say it hurts their knees or whatever, but that's simply because they're doing them incorrectly. So I figure you do the technique right, and then you gain all the benefits. So I would highly recommend doing as much of them in your training as you can. Thank you for the question. All right, so the next two questions are all about mobility and different exercises that I personally use to get into the squat. So like I just mentioned, I would highly recommend Kelly Starrett's stuff just for some basic mobility things. Figure out what hurts on your body and how to make it hurt less, and you'll be shocked at how that will help you. However, I actually did a video, it's a front squat video, where I go through an entire mobility for the front rack position, where I go literally from the ground up, my ankles, my hips, my knees, my everything, all the way up to my wrists, my elbows, my shoulders, my neck, all of it. I go all the way up using bands and different type of techniques. I would highly recommend that you go check out that video, because that is going to give you a much more in-depth answer than I'm going to be able to kind of describe to you here. Next question, I'm sorry, I'm not going to butcher your name, but you want to know best quad builder for a home gym, and that would be front squats, my friend. Front squats. Jan Sotak asks, what squat variation would you recommend for MMA fighters? Or I'm just going to go into combat sports in general, like jiu-jitsu or even football, rugby, things like that, where it's a lot of tackling, a lot of body-on-body contact. I think for those sports in general, a front squat, an SSB, or a Zercher squat is probably going to be your best thing. Or again, like I mentioned in the other question, like holding something out in front of you like a sandbag or an Atlas stone or something that you need to crush to your body, and then doing squats like that is also going to be very, very beneficial, especially in a conditioning type of setup for your sport. Now, the reason why I think that's so important is because a back squat is great, and you need to train back squats, don't get me wrong. However, at no time in your sport are you ever holding someone on your back. This isn't WWE, right? Like, if you are fighting in front, if you're grappling, if you're wrestling, then all your control is up front. If you get behind someone, all of your control is up front. If you're in the ground, your control is up front. If you're behind somebody, you have a rear naked choke, all of your control is up front. So that means your crush, your squeeze, your hug power needs to be super, super strong, which in turn means that your posterior chain, everything on your back, needs to be super, super strong. The way to do that best in a squat variation is to stick that weight out in front of you. So again, something like a front squat, a Zercher squat, or an SSB squat is going to do a lot to help that. The only thing that I will say about a Zercher squat is if you are a strong guy and you're doing stuff like 400 or 500 pounds on a Zercher squat, and you're holding that bar here on your arms, then you could potentially do a little bit of damage. Not like real damage, but like bruising damage. And then during your rolling sessions, if you were constantly bruised up on your forearms and stuff, that's not going to be helping your game. So you might want to choose something more like your front squat or an SSB instead of that. But again, if you can get something, especially in a conditioning type of setting where you're mixing with front carries and full body movements, but getting something that you're hugging to your body, whether it be a sandbag, another person, an Atlas stone, something heavy, crush to your body, do squats, do lunges, do carries, that type of stuff is going to do amazing things to help you out in your sport. Thank you very much for the question. All right, Robin wants to know, is it normal to feel nauseated after a few heavy sets of squats? And if so, how should one work through nausea? So yeah, man, that's completely normal. Like, if you were working hard, if you were at a high percentage and you're doing high rep squats, everyone will start to feel nauseous at some point. People either get nauseous or they get lightheaded and start to pass out. But one of those two things start to happen, and that's simply your body telling you that it is unhappy with what you're doing and it would like you to stop. However, your body is telling you that because it wants you to stay exactly how you are, because it knows that currently you are safe, you're surviving, it can handle the current situation, right? Now you're trying to push it outside of its comfort zone, and it's letting you know that it is unhappy about it. So basically, man, you got to push through. You got to buck up. I wish that I could have some sort of sympathy for you, but I throw up 30 to 50 times a day, every single day. So, yeah, man, it's something you got to push through. If you can't push through it, then this game probably isn't for you. But I truly believe that if you just make your goals bigger than your feelings, then you're going to be completely fine. You'll be able to push through and you will get it done. Thanks, brother. Be safe. Don't go overboard with it. I'm not trying to tell you to be an idiot, but I am saying that if you never get uncomfortable, then you're never going to change. So thanks, man. I hope that helps. Ronan AJ asks about my favorite supersets or giant sets to do with squats. And that's kind of like choosing my favorite puppies, right? Like I have too many choices. I don't know. I couldn't really pick the best one. I could tell you probably one of the worst ones that I ever did was I set up 500 pounds on an SSB, and I would do sets of 8, might have been 10, but I believe it was sets of 8, and then I would immediately turn around and sprint 200 meters carrying a sled, or not carrying, dragging a sled behind me, and then as soon as I got back, I jumped right back on the squats and did a set of 8 or 10 or whatever it was. That was one of my challenge workouts for one of my birthdays a couple years ago. If you guys don't know, the very last day of before I turn the next year, I always do a challenge workout, and that was probably one of the worst. I can't remember how many rounds I did it. It might have been like 6 or 7 rounds of that, but that was pretty terrible. I would highly encourage anyone that has not experienced the brutal love of what a hard squat day is, combine a high-ish rep set, like 8 to 10 reps of pretty heavy squats, somewhere in like the 70 to 75% rep range, and then immediately afterwards sprint 400 meters or do a 200 meter sled drag or a long carry or something like that, and then go right back to squats and just vacillate between the two until you hate your life, because that is not going to take long. Go a little bit longer than you want to, and you'll be shocked at what that could do. It's a great challenge workout. It's a great way to finish a year if you're looking for something to do and you have a birthday coming up. I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. Clay asks, every time I get under the bar, the weight feels stupid heavy. Would higher frequency, lower intensity approach perhaps help with this? Man, I don't know what your programming is, and I don't know a lot about you, so it's tough to say, but what I will say about when the weight feels heavy on your back is the same way that like you can build a tolerance to alcohol, you can build a tolerance to heavy things. So if you only put 500 pounds on your back once every 6 months, it is going to feel like a truck. But if you have 500 pounds on your back fairly regularly, then it doesn't feel nearly as bad. Your body literally gets used to that sort of weight. That is one of the reasons why I use knee wraps in my training. It's not really so I can have a higher total with knee wraps. I don't care about my total. What I care about is my body building that type of just tolerance to that weird shakiness, the lightness of your head, the feeling you're going to pass out, the world starting to close in. All of that are things that can be trained and built and done, but you can't do it without spending time in that zone. So a lot of times I will do heavy squats with knee wraps on just so that my unwrapped squats don't feel quite as bad, because just like everyone else, if I spend enough time away from 500 or 600 pounds, when I come back to it, I cannot believe how that feels in my back. And it literally feels like if I start to drop in for the squat, I'm going to die, so I'm not going to do it. And that starts playing mental games, so really just getting it on your back more often can help a lot with that. Something else that I could recommend if you have a gym for it is yoke walks. That will do tremendous things. I am going to address that in another question, so I'm not going to get into it here. But if you have access to a yoke, that's an easy way to build this tolerance quickly and make your whole body super, super strong. So thank you very much for the question, brother. I hope that helps. Duke Dirt Farmer asked the best way to go all the way down to squats without losing position or misgrooving. For me personally, I think a lot of the reason why people misgroove down in the bottom of squat is because they're thinking that they know that they need to get lower, right? Like everyone's going, I am not low enough. You've all been there on the squat where you're like, I still have another inch or two. And most people, what their brains say is we need to drop down. So literally they just bend forward and they drop the bar down. And yes, the bar did change position, but your hip angle did not change. So in order to fix this, what I highly recommend, you guys have probably heard me say this before, is to push your knees out in the bottom of your squat. So if you're in the bottom of squat and you have no other place to go, the reason why is because your body is in the way, the same way that a pregnant lady's body gets in the way when she tries to sit down. That's why you don't see a pregnant lady just flop on a couch. She starts pushing her knees out to allow room for her body, for her legs to receive her body. And you need to do the same thing in the squat. you were down low enough that your belly, your hips, your everything is getting in the way. So literally you need to push your knees out to create a little bit more space. You'll still be able to maintain position and then come out of that hole. However, if your flexibility and mobility is not good, that's gonna be very, very tough for you to do. And it's gonna be very, very tough to be strong in that position. So I would highly recommend working on your hip mobility, your grip, your groin flexibility, things like that, so that the bottom of that position can still be strong. But ideally in the bottom, you're gonna be able to push your knees out. And then if you lose position after that, it has everything to do with your breathing and bracing, and that's something that is a completely different issue. Give it a try, I hope it helps. Thank you for the question. Biggest 195 wants to know what my feet are doing during the squat. So this is actually a really, really important thing that a lot of people don't think about. A lot of people know about, like, some people say push through your heels. I don't agree with that. I think you should have 3 points of contact between, like, kind of the underneath your big toe and kind of the ball of your foot, the outside edge of your foot, and then the heel of your foot. That 3 points contact. However, what I'm actually doing with my feet is taking my toes and I'm spreading them out. Like if this is your foot in a shoe, I'm taking them going like this, and I'm trying to grab the floor. I'm literally trying to grip the floor with my feet, and then I'm trying to crank it outward. So one of the ways that I've been able to do this is through a video of Chris Delphins. He was helping Mark Bell one time, and he showed him how to stretch out his feet. And if you guys can imagine this being my foot, he takes his hand and slides it between his toes and then starts cranking them around and bending them, and then taking his foot and cranking his foot around. And when you do this, you get all kinds of just gnarly pops and just cracks, and you feel your foot literally getting wider and flatter and just spreading out, because much like foot binding practices many, many years ago, like in other places, when your foot gets like this is not a stable platform. If you can flatten this back out, you're gonna be much better off. So stretching out your toes, those bones, getting your feet out of shoes more often does a ton to help that out. So I would recommend highly doing that, but also when I'm actually in the squat, I'm trying to spread my toes apart, trying to grip the floor like I have an eagle claw, an eagle talon, trying to grip the floor, and then I'm cranking it outward. That is exactly what I'm doing, which leads up to setting my knees, stacking my ankles, setting my knees, giving me a good, strong base for me to start descending on. So I hope that helps you out, man. Thanks for the question. Henry's Champ wants to know how to engage your back in your squat setup. I already mentioned it a little bit earlier about bending the bar across your back. However, one of the biggest ways to get your back engaged in a squat is going to be moving your hands in a little bit. A lot of people like to keep their hands out really wide, and we talked about that earlier as well because of wrist, shoulder, or elbow mobility. But if you do have the mobility to bring your hands in, you will actually build a bigger foundation for that bar to sit on, and you will have more purchase with the bar, which equals more control. And just like earlier, more control typically leads to more power. So I would highly recommend trying to bring your hands in, like start out with your hands in a normal position on the squat for your first warm-up set, and then just bring them in literally like half a finger length. And then next set, half a finger length. Keep trying to crank it in to the point that it gets too uncomfortable for you not to. But the more bunched up and tight your upper back is, the more foundation that bar has, and the better you can typically do. So that is already gonna start engaging your rhomboids and kind of your upper back and kind of getting that bar sitting on there. But then secondly, bending that thing across your back, bending that bar like it's a horseshoe, trying to rip it out of the front of your chest is going to drop those elbows in, locking your lats, engaging the entire back, and just stick that bar as one of your body. It's literally gonna like meld with your body. So that is exactly what I try to do. That's what I try to get my athletes to do, and I see great results from it. So hopefully you'll be able to apply it. Thank you very much for the question. The driver Kaya asked, I have trouble keeping the weight over the middle of my foot despite all traditional cues like pushing your knees out. I immediately was gonna say, you need to push your knees out. You're pushing your butt back. That's why you can't keep it there. However, you say you do that and it's not helping. So honestly, if you are doing that, if you're pushing your knees out, most likely what's happening is that you're not starting with that bar over top of the middle of your foot. So many people, when they unrack a barbell for the squat, if you watch them from the side, they are already kind of bent over. Those elbows are kicking back, they're bent over, their butt's kind of sticking out. It's a terrible position to start from, and then as things get heavier or they drop down lower, it just progressively gets worse and worse. So what I try to tell my athletes to do, and what I especially do myself, is before I descend, when I walk that bar out, one of the last things that I do before I drop in is I flex my butt to bring my hips underneath the bar. If it is back behind the bar whatsoever, I do not drop in. I bring my knees, or I flex my butt hard enough that it comes all the way straight. My hips are directly underneath my shoulders, which is right over the middle of my foot, and the bar should be right there. From there, I push my knees out, which allows me to stay more erect, keeping that bar over the middle of my foot for longer. And then when my hips do break, it is deep enough that as I continue to push my knees out to allow room to receive my body, that bar will stay over top of the middle of my foot, and then I'll be able to drive out of it. My guess is that all this is probably just some sort of technique problem, but I can just about guarantee if you start in a better position, you're probably gonna end in a better position. So I hope that helps you out, brother. Thank you for asking the question. Tyler Croft wants to know, how fast and how much did the yoke help your squats? I just got one in my gym, blah, blah, blah. You're going to start doing them. Dude, the Yoke did amazing things for my squat. Now, I will say the Yoke is the fastest central nervous system drainer of just about any exercise out there. I know people are like, central nervous system burnout, blah, blah, it doesn't exist, blah, blah. Yeah, it does. A couple very heavy runs of a Yoke walk, you will absolutely get CNS burnout to the point that you actually get the Yoke flu is what we call it, because literally the next day after a hard Yoke session, you will have a fever. Some people throw up. You'll stay in bed all day. You feel achy. You have the flu, right? And it's just because you push too hard on the Yoke. So you do have to be very, very careful. But the reason why that happens and the reason why this works so well for your squat is because if you're walking around with 800 pounds on your back regularly, 600 pounds on a squat doesn't feel too bad anymore. And so for me personally, like I talked about earlier, building that tolerance and just getting used to having those types of weights on my back did amazing things for my squat. There was a time when it was like every Thursday night I would go and I'd do my Yoke walks and go super, super heavy. And then the very next morning within a 12-hour span, I was doing my squats and still had some carryover from the heavy Yoke walks to my squats. And that was a time in my life when my squat went from, I guess, probably about 550 to about 650, and it was just going like this. I could not believe the difference it was making. However, I was going through a lot of CNS dig, a lot of things going on because I didn't understand how to balance it yet. So definitely watch my Yoke video. That will give you a really good idea of how to start working it into your program and how to actually use it correctly. But the Yoke can do amazing things for your squat if you do have some sort of access to it. So I would highly recommend it. But again, be very, very careful because it will run you right in the dirt if you let it. So I hope that helps you out, brother. Thanks. All right, Phantom100 asks, hip drive. Which cues do you to initiate proper hip drive without having the hip shoot up too early, ball far forward? So I'm probably going to lose some subscribers here, but I don't think hip drive is all that important. I know if you are a starting strength guy or you're in love with Mark Ripto, then you're going to bash me for this. But like, guys, your hips shoot up. They do. There's not one person in squatting history who's ever not used their hips to squat, all right? So I don't cue my hips. My hips are gonna do what they're gonna do anyway. What I cue is try to picture myself pushing the floor away, almost as if you were in a room that was too small, right? So imagine yourself where you're all hunched over, you cannot stand up straight, but something happens and you wanna get out of this room, right? So I put my back against the top of the wall, I put my feet on the ground, and literally I try to wedge myself between the two. That is what I'm picturing in the squat when I'm actually pushing out of the hole. Also, the other cues I'm using is my upper back, kind of my traps, my rhomboid area, I'm pushing back into the bar. I'm not thinking hips up and then back, because that will give you a good morning. I'm thinking back, because your hips are gonna shoot anyway. So if you can already get on top of it and get the head start, for most lifters, you will do much, much better. Another cue that I got from Jim Wendler that I use on every single squat that I do is when I'm coming out of the hole, I push up on the bar like I'm trying to military press it behind my head. Now, obviously, if you have a heavy weight on there, you're not gonna be able to move it, but that does a lot to get your elbows back under the bar, which fights your chest up. If you can keep your chin down, you're in a much better position. Guys, your hips are going to drive. You need to worry about keeping that chest up so that you don't fold, right? I've said it before and I'll say it again that I believe that the squat is a core movement more than a leg movement. That's why you can do so much more on a leg press than you can on a squat. It's because you don't need to stabilize it with your core, right? So if you focus more on your core and what your upper body is doing to hold the position, your lower body will take care of itself. Now, again, I'm gonna get a lot of hate. People are gonna bash me, do whatever you want. But guys, that is what works for me as well as all my athletes, and I have some of the best squatters in the world at my gym. So if you guys want to give it a try, see what works for you, please do. If it doesn't, please discard it. It does not matter to me. I'm not emotionally tied to this or married to any certain sort of squat thing, but I don't think everyone should squat the same. So if your hips are shooting up too early, I think you need to focus on other things like driving your arms up, driving your back, keeping your chin tucked. Those types of things are going to do a lot to help your positioning on the squat versus just trying to do what you hear other people saying to do. So I hope that helps you out, brother. I'm sorry to get a little pontificate on that. And just thanks for the question, man. 00Truck00 asks, when coming out of the hole, should you lead with your hips or your chest? And again, I just mentioned it. I lead with my back and my hands. I would highly recommend trying to figure out something than just those two things. If you lead with your chest, most likely your chin's gonna shoot up, throwing your lower lumbar out of place, and you're not gonna be as strong. If you shoot with your hips, then most people are gonna do a good morning, so I wouldn't recommend doing that either. I would try to go back into the bar. Keep your chin up, your chin down, neutral spine, as well as pushing up on the bar, trying to stay as erect as possible. Hope that helps, dude. Anyway, guys, that is time that I have. Thank you guys so much for all the awesome questions. Just taking the time to go over to my Instagram and ask them, as well as vote on which ones you guys want me to see. I love being able to be interactive with you guys, give you guys what you want. So I just thank you so much. I will catch up with you guys later in the week. Hopefully some of you found this helpful, and I'm sorry if I did not get to your questions. This is just the amount of time that I had. But later in the week, I will catch you then. Until I do go out to something amazing in my lives, keep working hard, people. Be nice to each other. I'll see you then.